So we have one more speaker between break. I mean, we've had British accents, we've had Canadian accents, we've had US accents, so I had to find a Brit. So when I had to find a Brit, who do I call? My good friend Stuart Browne, who was here. This is like the class of 2020 yet again.
Yep.
He passed edition 2020, COVID happened, I had to wait, so Stuart's back. So Stuart, welcome.
Thank you, Paul.
And nice shoes, by the way.
Thank you. I have a few strange things today, so no PowerPoints, but a bag of strange props. So my name's Stuart Browne. I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Resulting IT, so a British company. Been around for around 20 years. We're quite strange in the SAP ecosystem. We're not a systems integrator. Instead, we do everything that systems integrators don't do or shouldn't do, which starts with what used to be help people set centers of excellence up. It then moved to help people to business side rescue programs that weren't working. We published quite a lot of research on that. The levers that drive success on SAP programs. But I recognized in about 2018 that people were really struggling with their S4 business case. So we decided to wear a kind of a business side hat and try ourselves to produce an S4 business case and make believe one. And we're kind of dumbfounded about how hard it was. So we went about building a process and some technology to do that. Wind forward 5 or 6 years from there, I think we've done about 30 S4 business cases now, mainly in Europe, for some really big organizations, including people like Transport for London, who've got really complex, wide-ranging SAP systems. So what I'm going to do today, I'm going to talk to you about, well, it's going to be a bit strange, there's no slides, that's the only slide. I'm going to do a little bit of a quiz, a little bit of a history lesson, and then I'm going to try and distill out a few things that are the things that we take into our business case modeling, that are the things, it's the difference that makes the difference. So the quiz part of this, I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and I'm conscious there's SAP people in the room that might know the answers to these, so I'd ask you to refrain from answering. And this quiz question is based on my best research. It might not be precise, but it's based on my best research. So how many ECC and S4 systems do you think there are, production systems in customers across the world? 65,000. Any offers on 65,000? More, lower, higher?
Higher.
There's actually only about 35,000 ECC and S4 systems in the world. So how many of those do you think are live on S4HANA? Not have bought the licenses, how many are live on S4HANA?
8,000.
8,000 is pretty spot on from my research, okay? So S4HANA was launched in 2015, 8 years ago. We've done 8,000 of that 35,000 in 8 years. We have between now and the end of 2030, ostensibly, to do the remaining, what's the math on that, 27,000? Yeah? So 8 years, we've done 8,000. 7 years to do 27,000. Is the way we've done that going to address that? Probably not. The other big scary thing within that is we haven't done all the big, complex, difficult ones yet. We haven't done the oil and gas majors, the pharma companies, the big global manufacturing businesses, all those organizations that have got a big change challenge as well. Just let that sink in for a second. 8 years to do, or 7 years to do all of that work. So I'm going to finish this quiz section just to get you, I want a bit of a mantra. I want this saying out loud, right? So what is 6 plus 1? What's 5 plus 2? What's 4 plus 3? What's 3 plus 2? No, it's not, sorry. what's 3 plus 4? What's 2 plus 5? And what's 1 plus 6? Think of a vegetable. Does somebody want to shout out the vegetable they thought of? Any others? Oh, this usually works. Usually carrot. There's some statistics that say that when people repeat the number 7, maybe if you don't cock it up halfway through, actually, when people repeat the number 7, the first thing they think about is a carrot. And I've looked at why that is. There's some weird research behind it. Would you mind holding my carrot for this presentation? It's not a euphemism, it's fine. You don't have to hold it in that strange way. Just put it on the floor if you like. I'm not going to be able to talk seeing that carrot swinging in the wind. Right, so the quiz question was the answer to that quiz question, the first one was which number? How many SAP customers? 35,000. So the history lesson. 35,000 BC, we changed the way we worked. We started to work differently because we invented tools. And the first tool 35,000 years ago was, somewhere in my bag, was this, a stick. And once we finished hitting each other on the head with it and trying to stick it into things, we realized that if you take a stick and hold it in your hands like this and do this with it and put it onto a surface, it creates friction. And that friction creates heat, and the heat creates fire. And with that, we learned to cook. The main thing that differentiates us from every other species in the world is we created tools and we learned to cook with fire. The other thing that happened is when we rub this on another surface, the friction erodes the surface and creates a divot in it. And actually, what that really was the first drill. So I'm going to spend, very strangely, I know for an SAP conference, a couple of minutes giving you the history of drills. Okay? So once we'd used this 35,000 years ago, about 20,000 years later, somebody innovated. Humans are great at innovation. The guys that have spoken today, the curiosity, the engineer, that was taken, and somebody took a bow, as in a bow and arrow, and they wrapped the string around that. And when you pull that forward and backwards, it rotates faster. You get greater torque, and we created a mechanical tool. It's called the bow drill. That lasted quite a while before we innovated further. Probably about the 1700s, I think it was. We got to this. I brought this on a plane here, by the way. This is the crank drill. It's got a chuck on there. We can put a drill bit in it. We can hold it and make it, use that for our kind of drilling activity. If you think about the Spanish Armada, the ships in the Spanish Armada were probably made using this. The ship that you guys sunk around Boston in the Boston Tea Party, one of ours, I think, from memory, was made with this. If I wind forward a bit further, I need to thank Evan on the Cloud ALM stand for bringing this in. So this was probably 1800s. The Victorians would have used this. Clever thing about this is the engineers had taken rotation that way through 90 degrees using bevel gears, but it's a geared drill. Yeah? So it's not just mechanical, it's got gearing in there to increase the power. And I think it was around 1819, two Australians attached an electric motor to this and created the first electric drill. In 1915, two people called Black and Decker innovated further with a different electric drill. And they kind of, what had happened with this is there's a lot of technical debt in this. You know, it's gone from being a hand tool to being an electrical version of the hand tool. What Black and Decker did is they created the pistol drill, which took the power a different way. This one's got a spirit level on it, pretty cool. And probably just forward and reverse gears. Nice and simple. And that's lasted a long time, right? From the 1915 to pretty much present day. But then, this came along. So this one's even cooler, right? Where this is on premise. This is cloud, right? Rechargeable, wireless, a light on there, different power settings, 20 different settings. How cool are these? Reverse, different torque settings. This one's even got a brushless motor. Hands up who knows what a brushless motor is and how it works and what the benefits are. Yeah? Similarly, actually, who knows what an in-memory database is and how it works and what the benefits are? Has anybody ever come across something called Wardley mapping? I know you have, because you spoke about it over a beer. So there's a guy called Simon Wardley, and he, in 2000, started a company called Photango. And his vision was that all of our photographs would live digitally in the cloud. And Canon bought it in 2001, a year into its life. And then in 2007, they folded it. Wasn't commercially viable. A year later, when iPhones started being more ubiquitous, and if you look to today, we're all storing our photos in the cloud. Simon Wardley was obviously a little bit pissed off with what had happened. You know, he got the timing wrong completely. And what he did is he created a model to explain why his innovation hadn't worked, and it's called Wardley mapping. And it works like this. On one axis, it says every product starts with a genesis. It starts with, if I can find my stick, it starts with this. And it moves from a genesis of an idea to a custom product. And from a custom product, it becomes a standard product. And from there, it becomes a commodity. So any product goes through that axis. The other axis on Wardley mapping is the supply chain. So it's the distance between the consumers and the suppliers of those products. Old world photography, you had a camera. For those old enough to remember, I think Paul might remember this one. There's sometimes a plug-in flash on the top that rotated around. There was film. There was a company that would develop your film. And there's a photo album. Today, there's a device, a phone, with a camera and a connection to the cloud. And what's happened is the supply chain of the number of players have collapsed. And the product's gone from a custom product to a standard product to a commodity. If you look at Wardley mapping, there's some great media market articles on it. It's a visual tool. It basically explains that everything will go through this flow and become a commodity. And you can use it to predict how technology might evolve. He's got some great things on things like serverless and how servers have become serverless now in virtual cloud and so on. So as a race, we're great at innovating. With that guy in particular, we've learned to predict the trajectory of where things are going. Now, if I flip that a little bit now and go back to drills for one final second before we bring it back to the title of the presentation. By the way, how many of you have got one like this? Show of hands. And how many have got one like this? Okay. What's the purpose of a drill, by the way? Make a hole, right? Every hand went up in the room, right? You've all got drills, and these are for making holes. So my guess is that your houses are just full of holes. Swiss cheese, right? Is that right? Must be the case, right? You've all got drills that make holes. Am I right? Are your houses full of holes? Why? Why not?
The screw, you can use them to tie.
Use them to what, sorry?
The screw, customizing, tie things up.
See,
Use it to construct things.
Cool. Theodore Levitt, who is one of the godfathers of marketing, basically said people don't want a quarter-inch drill. They want a quarter-inch hole. I think that's bullshit. They don't want a hole. They want the thing that goes in the hole. When I was explained to my lady called Abby, who works for me, who's our partnerships and go-to-market person, I explained I was going to do this presentation, and she just said, please don't do that. Please don't go on stage with drills. And we went through it in her world, and I said, so what did you use a drill for last time? And she said, to put a shelf up. Okay, where did you put the shelf? In my daughter's bedroom. My daughter's 11 or 12. She just started high school in the UK. Why did you need a shelf? Well, I've got younger kids, and doing homework downstairs distracts her. A desk is always really messy. I wanted to clear a desk. But why, Abby? Why do you care? Well, because I wanted to get a good education. But why do you care? Well, I was a single mum. My education helped me to do what I've done. I wanted to have a good start in life. Why do you care, though? Who gives a shit? And then Abby said, because I love her. Abby doesn't want a hole or a drill or a shelf. She loves her daughter so much that what she wants to do is make a hole in the wall and put a shelf on it. Ostensibly, Abby could have done that with this. She loves her daughter so much, the tool doesn't matter. And this is the important thing to think about if you're going to do a business case for S4. Nobody gives a shit about the tool. Your execs don't care about it. What they care about is the things that matter to them. So eliciting what matters is the first stage in building a really, really good business case. And there's a few people spoke today, I think Miles did, talking about the importance of stories and the importance of telling a story. You know, it's an innate human thing. Miles also showed, you know, the evolution of diagrams and the fact we've used diagrams to try and explain things, and that's getting it even more complex. There isn't enough room and there aren't enough dimensions on a page to explain to busy senior people what you're trying to do. So the key we've found, and we've done a couple of business cases for S4HANA that have secured 100 million of investment, and I'll show you some of them in a second, or some of the deliverables we've produced to do that. But there's some really, really key things within that. So the first one is building a narrative. PowerPoints are great, but they're also pretty shit, really, as well. Because you've got to make up the story behind a PowerPoint. You can talk somebody through it, but stand alone, they don't tell a story. You have to write. The guy was speaking before about the importance of journaling and writing. Actually, going through the habit of writing down what your systems will do is a really important step. But writing a narrative, telling the story. The other really important thing in there is future pacing. So, you know what I mean by future pacing? So most people talk about today and today's problems and today's challenges. Future pacing is talking about what's going to happen in the future. And something strange happens when you start to future pace. If we talk about the here and now, it's really hard to think about getting over the obstacles. If I go to the future, talk about the future, I can talk about a future state, and I can start to believe in it. And there's some real simple tricks in that as well. When you were at school and you did verb tenses, it was really confusing, right? There's a verb tense called future perfect. And to think in future perfect, you've got to go past the future and look back. A really good example of it, which is a complex bit of English to get your head around, when will I have had done something? You go past having done it and look back. If you can explain your story, not from here to here, but in the future looking back, so by the time we move to S4HANA, we will be able to do this. If I say, we've got a whole lot of supply chain problems and we need to fix them, that's really different from, in the future, once we've been live with S4HANA for 12 months, we'll have the slickest supply chain in our industry. And the way that will work is like this. That's a really, really simple linguistic pattern to do the same thing. Ultimately, a business case is a piece of marketing. The third part of this is also flipping the focus from logic to emotion. As engineers and as architects, logic is the go-to thing. You need to be able to describe. I've seen it during the last couple of days. Lots of people explain things in lists. Lots of people are list-focused. But actually, it's emotion that gets you to do things. If you think of the last things you've bought, hands up who's written a business case for something they've bought in the last 12 months. Nobody, right? One, Thomas, don't believe you. But we don't. We don't do business cases for things we buy because we don't buy with logic. We mainly make the final decision with emotion. And actually, that's a B2C transaction. But B2B buying and selling is really similar. It's just somebody else's budget. At the end of the day, there's emotion involved in making that decision. So my view is if you can elicit what matters most to your business, Miles mentioned your strategy and breaking your strategy down into components, what matters to execs. If you can elicit that, one of the ways we do this is we interview global execs and then heads of business units, and we capture sound bites. So we'll interview them, and we'll ask a really simple question. Well, first question, what's your strategy? Some say, I don't know, we don't have one. We tell them it's on the website. They go, oh, yes, we do have a strategy. Then we say, OK, to hit that strategy, what does your ERP system need to be doing, or how does it need to be different 5 years from now to deliver your strategy? We don't start with S4HANA and BTP and all the components. We start with visiting them in their world and saying, what needs to be different for you to deliver your strategy? And those sound bites are really important because what they give is what I'd call a double bind. When we play back the business case, against those quotes, the execs can't say, actually, I didn't mean that. Yeah? It's about taking that strategy, taking what they want and capturing it, and then demonstrating how the solutions that you're looking at can deliver that. Does that make sense? There's a difference than starting with BTP and IBP and S4 and Ariba. They don't care. Yeah? Find what matters first, and then work out how the strategy supports that. To the point, if a client comes to me and says, will you help us do an S4 business case? I'll say no. I'll help you do a strategic ERP business case, and if S4 is the answer, cool. If you walk into this starting with the answer, that's not what your execs want to hear. There's another thing around capabilities. I was talking to Chris Mahoney about it earlier on. It's been mentioned a few times, and Miles just mentioned it as well, the notion of competitive advantage. If you can elicit, you have all these capabilities or all these processes, there's probably only 4 or 5 that matter from a competitive advantage perspective. So we call these your signature requirements. What are the big things your system needs to do to give you competitive advantage in those areas? And plotting the level to which you need to drive competitive advantage. We've done some analysis with customers where we've plotted one axis of competitive advantage from bottom line to top line to commodity, and then customization. And what you find after 20 years of developing and managing an SAP system, they've customized all the commodity processes. Why would you do that? With clean core and simplifying things, whether you go in brownfield, greenfield, intermediate, actually unraveling those commodity ones, using that commodity versus competitive advantage term to sentence what goes clean and what you customize and what you lose is a really, really simple part of the process. Well, when we do a business case, it looks something like this. Well, one of the components does. It's a playbook. And this playbook is on a company's brand, and it's all in their language, and it's a story. This is a 70-page story. And it's full of things. The start of it talks about their strategy as an organization. What do we want to be? And it's a piece of marketing, an internal piece of marketing material. And partway through here, we don't use the word capabilities in these, but these really are. There's a capability map, like that explains the different capabilities they need. And then for each of those, there's a couple of pages of narrative that says, what will that be like in the future? And what do our execs want? And then right at the very back of that is a timeline that says, here's how that'll pan out globally. There's a little story on the first time we did one of these. We were making this up the first few times we did it because there was no standard way of doing it. And we presented this to an organization who had 7 different regions, and we identified, I think, 9 or 10 capabilities. And this included every corner of the world, from Japan to South America. And we thought we were going to get it signed off. And one guy said, I'm not signing it. Not buying in. Okay, why not? And he said, because I want my own hexagon. Right? We had them. Yeah, we had them at that point because we knew we made these hexagons up. They're not real things. They're hallucinations on a page that describe their business. And this guy had said, can I have my own hexagon? And can I have a page in the playbook about my hexagon? Yeah, that's exec buy-in. So that whole process is our model for doing this. And I'm going to finish. I know we've got a couple of minutes left. I'm going to finish with a few other examples around this. Because real business case documents are marketing documents, and because storytelling is so important, I think looking at marketing as examples is really good cross-fertilization. I'm going to give one slightly longer example, one really, really quick example. So the long one is James Watt. Do we all know what James Watt invented? Steam engine. Do you know what else he invented? He invented a unit of measure, right? He was trying to sell steam engines in Cornwall in southwest England during the Industrial Revolution. And the problem with tin mines is they flooded. When they flooded, they couldn't mine tin. So what they would do is they would tie a big bucket to a couple of horses onto a pulley, and the horses would pull the water out, and they'd tip it out and go again. And James Watt thought, well, I could sell my steam engine here to do that. So he tried it, and nobody wanted it. He couldn't get a business case. He couldn't get them to buy in. So James Watt invented the unit of measure of horsepower because the mine owners didn't understand what a steam engine was. So what he did is he worked out how much energy does it take to lift a ton of water 100 feet, and that became horsepower. And he actually lied a bit. He actually tweaked the numbers in his favor. But he created a unit of measure called horsepower. And then when he went back to the mine owners and said, look, you're going to need 2 horses. The horses can only work for 6 hours. That means you're going to need, how many? 10 horses to do this around the clock, and you've got to feed them. My machine is 30 horsepower. So it's a no-brainer. He'd met them in their world rather than try and sell the technology. If he'd have come up with a different unit of measure for a steam engine, a kilowatt, they wouldn't have been interested. The really last one I'm going to tell you really, really quick. Somebody pitches a film in Hollywood. There's some blurb that goes with that to pitch it to the production companies. And the blurb tries to summarize a 300-page film script. The fastest ever one of those is 3 words. Anyone know what those 3 words were? The film was Alien, and the 3 words were Jaws in space. Yeah? Explaining something that simply and succinctly, going back to Miles's point before on complexity and simplicity, getting your essence boiled down to something really, really simple that people get like that, I think is the key to doing an S4 business case. So that's me done, Paul. I'm ready to head back to the UK.
Great job. Once I got through the accent, I learned a lot.
Oh, yeah.
So I really want to thank Stuart and Evan Stoddard's drills.
Yeah, Evan, if Evan's here, thank you very much, because he's loaned me all of his tools, because I couldn't really bring this on a plane as well, so...
Stuart phones me. Paul, I've got to bring some drills with me. Can you help? So we have a few minutes for any questions for Stuart.
That's because I'm before coffee.
You are, but yes.
How do you pass security without...
No,
So I didn't. They were smuggled in by somebody else. I used a drill mule.
Yeah. Your triple back will be interesting because I think that's been picked up, so they'll watch you return.
Yeah.
So I've got a question. So you deal with a lot of business executives, right? Any recommendations for the architects here in the room, what they could do to better support them?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. So one is, when I was involved in SAP 20 years ago, SAP had something called a BPML, Business Process Master List. And it kind of evaporated a little bit, and there's various other assets now. I found the BPML really, really useful because you could articulate the scope of processes. We've kind of resurrected that in what we do, but what we do instead is we don't start with an accelerator and say, here's the tool provider's view of business processes. We start by saying, how do you describe your business processes? We get the business to describe it in their language first, because they're going to buy into that if you do that. I think the other thing within that then is if you then go and workshop each of those with heads of supply chain, heads of finance, and so on, one of the tricks is asking them what they tolerate, what the squeaky door problems are. So, if you have a squeaky door in your house and if you don't put WD-40 on it, it just carries on squeaking. But you put up with those squeaky door problems. You don't go and get the WD-40 and do it. Businesses are full of people that have got lots of things they tolerate. And because of the business IT kind of, however they work together, nobody says, just tell me all the crap you put up with day to day. Letting people get that off the chest, that's transformation gold dust. So if you can say, here's my process structure, and against that, here's all the things that are tolerating me, and when we do this new ERP program, we're going to chip those off. That gets them leaning in. And I think once they're leaning in, it's easier to convince on other things as well.
Great. So on the live stream, tons of questions have been coming in. Where'd you get the shoes?
I have more, actually. I could have worn different ones. These are Doc Martens, but I like to buy British, you see. With Brexit, we can't buy anything outside of the UK anyway now. So.
Okay, thank you very much, and don't forget your carrot.
I have a question.
Oh, question?
Stuart, what were, or when you are helping companies to prepare for business case, if the company is into a multi-fragmented IT setup, right, where SAP plays a role, big one, but it is not the only system that plays the massive role in the overall IT architecture, how do you recommend, a transformation in those kind of cases? Or like top 3 challenges, what should the approach?
Well, I think it starts with, do they want to transform? Can I have my carrot back a second?
Sure.
I think it depends.
You didn't trust him, did you, with the carrot?
No, it wasn't I don't trust him, but it depends on whether it's a carrot or a stick thing, right? If you're going to them to say, we need to go to a single system and it's a stick, that's very different than saying, what do you want to do as a business? So an example in that model is, strategically, is shared service is something that's important to drive efficiencies in the business? If it is, that's an exec carrot. Saying we're going to move to central finance is an SAP stick. And that's the same for procurement. Looking at those shared processes, I think central finance is one, central procurement's another that people should look at as well as Ariba on the journey to S4. So taking those, I guess, pervasive processes that trying to harmonise processes globally is really hard for big organisations, especially when you get down to plant level. But at plant level, it's easier to manage as part of a wave deployment. I think talking about the blue field or the selective model, I've spoken to a few people during the last couple of days around, there are different ways of, it shouldn't just be blue. There's a whole spectrum of colours there that you can look at, and there's different ways of doing it. So I think it's dangerous to try and hit the business with a stick because you've only got 3 ways of doing your transformation. So that'd be my view is focus on what the business wants first, be a bit more creative around the options to get there, blue field, because there are lots of tools and lots of ways of doing it. And I think that's the hardest bit, that working that out for big organisations. Few people talking about downtime. There's loads of ways of not making that the problem. But I think as architects and technical people, we go and fascinate straight to the big problem. The thing I was saying before about future casting, looking at getting past a downtime window is a really hard challenge. Once you're past it, looking at how we did it in the past is a much easier way to think.
Yeah, that concept was great. I was able to visualize it, and I feel that it's a great way to tell that story.
Yeah, happy to have a later conversation if you want to.
Yeah. Brownfield, Greenfield, Bluefield. Stuart's working on
Orange field, carrot field,
or maybe yellow field coming up. So you might hear that next time. So we'll work on it. Okay, thank you, everybody. We're going to take a break now for half an hour till 11 o'clock. We've got 3 more great sessions to go. And again, thank you, and thank you for great presenters this morning.